Here we go. Okay, I don't know whether everyone can see this, but this is going to be a bit of a story because Alpha Mill has been a story. It started quite a long time ago, and it took a while to get to where we are today. And what I really want to talk about is how we managed to get it right, because it was a bit of a journey. Initially, oops, sorry, I was going to go back a minute. Hang on a sec, just a minute. Oh, sorry, I don't do this very often, but originally we wanted a building that looked something like this, but we ended up with something like this. And what I'm going to do is to talk to you about the process of how we actually got from this to this. So it started in April 2016. It actually started a year earlier than that, because I met Bob Gledhill at Scalefour North in 2015, and he was demonstrating 3D printing at Scalefour North, and he had lots of things that he'd done on a 3D printer, and I was fascinated by this. So I actually found his contact and sent him an email and asked him if he'd be interested in coming over to Dean Hall and giving us a talk about 3D printing. And he very gladly did. And it was a most interesting talk. He brought with him, I think, two 3D printers, and started using them in front of us and producing things. Now, at the same time, he was actually writing a book. And he said at his first session with us, he said, well, I'm writing a book about 3D printing, and if you'd like, I'll come over again and teach you all how to draw for 3D printing. So we said, oh yes, please. And this was the start of a relationship which Bob Gledhill helped us out with for several months. Now, the book was eventually published, and in the book was a mention about Fablabs, maker spaces and hacker spaces. Now, these are really a collection of groups of people who share the resources, and Fablab was one that was in Manchester. So I actually got interested in Fablab because it was in Ancoats in Manchester, and you can essentially go to a Fablab and use their machines free of charge. So in August 2016, I trotted off to Fablab in Manchester one day. It was a Saturday, because you could actually go on a Friday and a Saturday, and you could book time slots on various machines. And they had laser cutters, 3D printers, they got CNC cutters, they had t-shirt machines where you put transfers onto t-shirts. They got a fantastic collection of machines, all of which you could use free of charge. All you had to do was to actually attend a safety briefing, which took half an hour, and after that you could use these machines however you wanted. The only thing was you had to book a 1 hour time slot. Now, as we found out over time, 1 hour wasn't very much. So the first thing I did was to get Tony Williams on board so that we could actually go together and get 2 hours instead of 1 hour, because the sorts of things that we wanted to do on a laser cutter, you couldn't really achieve easily in 1 hour, because the machines are not that fast, depending, of course, what you want to do. But the machines are relatively slow because they're essentially burning a material. Anyway, the first model that we thought we would actually have a go at was a row of terraced houses, because we wanted a few of these on the layout. So we drew up the terraced houses, and the drawings are really the secret to laser cutting. You've got to be able to draw in a AutoCAD or a Corel Draw or Inkscape, or using any drawing package, so that these lines can actually get transferred onto the material that you're using. Now, the materials at Fablab were plywood and MDF, and these were available off the shelf in Fablab for relatively little cost. So we started off using MDF because everybody else was using MDF, and we thought that we would actually make a structure out of MDF, and we would try and use a very thin plywood engraved overlay for the skin. So this was the start of a plan. Now, we discovered fairly early on that the big problem with this, and I'm just going to hang on a sec, I'm just going to blow that up a bit. The big problem was interlocking corners. Now, if you've actually bought any of these off-the-shelf laser cut kits, you'll find that most people actually use interlock corners for brickwork. Now, we tried hours and hours and hours trying to get this interlocking to work satisfactorily, and in the end gave up, because these joints at the corners always look like interlock bricks. We could never ever get them to look like a decent finish, largely because of the thickness of the material you're using, and also the fact that a laser beam has essentially got a pointed tip to it. So it's a bit like a biro, and as it cuts through the material, you've got like an edge, a sloping edge to the material. So we eventually abandoned this idea, and about the same time the Fablab moved from Manchester to Altrincham, and it changed from a 2-day-a-week slot to a 1-day-a-week. So about that time we actually thought, well, where do we go from here? So one of the options was to try and get another member on board so we could get more machine time. We also looked at getting our own laser cutter, and we started to examine what was available. Now, there was an HPC CO2 laser, which you can get a desktop edition for about £2,000, but that only produced an A4 material size. There are bigger ones, and but they're a lot more money. So about that time, I found this Giles Favell, who is a 7mm modeler who made end-of-the-line model. Now, he was actually on a forum I was looking at. He produced these staircases in MDF. I think it was MDF. It's either MDF or plywood. And these were done on a laser cutter, and I thought, wow, that looks really smart. And he'd actually done these on a Darkly Labs diode laser. Now, a diode laser is not as powerful as a CO laser, and they're a lot cheaper. The downside was that Darkly Labs were in Australia, but they did actually sell their products worldwide. But they also did a A3 plus bed size. At that time that we were interested, they were also doing a promotion on this other machine that they were developing. So they were developing this Emblazer 2, which was still under development, but they were offering a significant discount on it. So Tony and I ummed and ahed about all this, and early 2017 we actually decided to pool our resources and our money and buy an Emblazer 2, which was great because it was still under development. It needed CE accreditation, and in the end we had to wait about 12 months from spending our money to getting the machine. But what a difference. In November 2017, we actually got the machine. It came with LaserWeb software, which is open source software. We did lots of testing with MDF and birch plywood and got absolutely nowhere. It was very disappointing. And then in January 18, eventually everything fell into place. The software changed because Dartley Labs had hooked up with an American organization who were developing a new piece of software, and using that software made such a difference. Also, I actually changed from using MDF and birch plywood, which everybody else was using, to using card. Now, card cuts so cleanly and quickly and easily, but not white card. And again, it took a while to find that out. Colored card works so much better than white card. So, but the light burn software that was being developed in America in conjunction with Dartley Labs was that was a game changer, total game changer. So from that moment on, from January, the first thing I started doing was trying to make a building to see if I can use some techniques using card. So I designed this Platelayers Hut, which was based on a drawing in the Pico Eric Plans book of Wadborough LMS. You can see the drawing there. So sketched it up in CorelDRAW and actually made a basic shell, which you can, whoops, sorry, I'm going to click the mouse, it keeps changing, but you can see here the basic shell cut out of mounting board. Now, mounting board was the card, the 1.5 mil thick card that I decided to use for a framework, coupled with a thin card overlay with the brickwork scored, so we didn't have interlocking bricks. So this was effectively office card, like you would just buy a pack of 100 sheets of card for printing tickets. So same sort of thing. So I made a few of these. A few members have had 1 or 2 copies of this, kits of this, and made up themselves. So that was a good start for trying out some new techniques. So the next steps after that were doing houses. So we came back to houses again. Now, houses in card were so much easier to do than MDF, and I actually made like a total interlocking structure, which was 3 layers of card with a brick overlay, and that was absolutely solid. I could stand on those, and they just didn't give. It was an excellent way of proving that card structurally was a sound material, especially when you use it with shellac, which we did. Once we started using card all the time, shellac was used extensively to solidify all the corners and all the edges. And once it's been shellacked, you can sand card just like you can wood. It's a wonderful material. Doors and windows we could actually cut. That's a 1p piece that you can see there. So we could actually make sash windows out of card. This card in this shot is actually 0.5 mil thick. So there are 3 layers of 0.5 mil thick card all glued on top of each other. And they make up into nice layered pieces that you can glue in separately to the structure. You can see there that there's a row of this is from the sloping houses that we developed, and these windows are actually glued in from the back. So so they were great for doors and windows too. And then February 2018, we thought, right, we'll start thinking about the mill. Now the mill on Slattocks was scheduled to cover the touchscreen monitor that actually controlled the operation of the layout. So we needed a building of a decent size to cover this up. So we made up a foam board mock-up and we posted on the Scalefour forum. Now, we don't post much on forums, anybody in our group, but we haven't posted for a long time, so I thought, oh, just put something up there so that we can show people what we're doing. Anyway, 3 hours later, we got a message back. You can't put an engine house there, and anyway, that mill just isn't suitable for your part of Manchester. So I said, well, that mill is actually from a photograph of a mill in Ancoats. Ah, yeah, but you're not making Ancoats. You're actually making Rochdale Oldham area. And they had decent mills. They had proper mills. So anyway, up steps Howard Bolton. Now, I don't know whether Howard's listening to this. He has been invited, but I'm not sure he's listening. But anyway, Howard's got a vast knowledge of cotton mills, as we were to discover. And he was quite happy to share his experience with us. And he churned this drawing out, which we looked at and thought, wow, that looks absolutely incredible. If we could make something like that, it'd be brilliant. So, but would it fit? Well, next thing was to measure everything up and send Howard a showing of what sizes we were playing with. So at the back of the layout, you can see where the screen is, and you can see where the baseboard joints were. So we actually measured everything up, and as it happens, it looked as if it would fit. Prototype size would actually fit. I mean, mills are huge. And anyway, we actually went off, Tony and myself, February 2018, to look at some mills. We knew nothing about cotton mills. A few were still standing, but there had been a hell of a lot that had been demolished. But Howard recommended that we had a look at these George Stott designed mills because they've got decorative brickwork, they've got common style windows, and the drawings are still available. And also the drawing that he had prepared was based on a George Stott building. So we actually trotted off and we looked at Warwick Mill first of all. Now, it just happened to be a day when the engineers for the mobile phone masts were present on site, and the top of the tower had a few masts on, so the gates were open. So we asked these guys if we could have a look around. So they said, oh yeah, sure, go in. So Tony and I went in and took loads of photographs. Now, this photograph is taken before the mill, parts of the mill were demolished, because the chimney is no longer there, and neither is the boiler house, which is this. Hang on a sec. This building just here. This is the boiler house. So that's no longer there, and this is gone as well. But the rest of it was still there. So we went in there and we took some photographs, and we actually decided that that would be quite a nice building, or an end of the building to model, because the building's huge. I mean, it's actually 270 feet long and 135 feet wide. The engine room itself is 65 feet by 36 feet. So these are big buildings. And I actually managed to locate all the drawings for Warwick Mill in the Oldham Local Studies and Archives facility in Oldham, where there's a huge collection of microfiche of all the George Stott buildings, the architect's drawings, and there were actually over 100 microfiche slides just for Warwick Mill. So this gives you some idea of what we were actually talking about. Now, hang on a second, I'm going to have to click my button again. So here we go. So we're actually looking at this, modeling this part here, and that's the area that we're looking at modeling, and that was, as a prototype size, that would actually fit exactly in the spot that we actually had. And here you can actually see the different floors that there are in the building. Now you can see the detail on these drawings. You've actually got all this fancy brickwork here, and the wall widths, everything, the dimensions. These are fully dimensioned architect's drawings, which were so invaluable for being able to draw up a design for the mill that we wanted. So essentially, this is a picture of the part of the building that we wanted to model. The only difference would be that the area to the left where it's got the grotty brickwork is the part where the boiler house was, which we wouldn't really be able to fit in because we hadn't got that space. So we had to make some compromises, and that'll come up a bit later on. But essentially that is the bit we wanted to model. So this is a drawing of what is known as the rope race wall. So if I enlarge that a bit, this is the engine house here, and you can actually see there's a huge flywheel in the engine house, which actually has ropes which go to different floors in the building, which are driving the shafts from which all the machines are operated. So basically this part of the mill is just like a production machine, if you like. And I've got two bits of the drawings here which I've tried to stitch together but not quite worked out. This is actually a big skylight on the top, so that there is some light showing into the part of the building, and you can see there is all sorts of staircases here up inside the part of the building. And if I just go back a bit, this is all inside this area, the center and the left part of this building. So if you look at the detail of the building itself, there's actually some quite intricate brickwork here. And having decided that we were going to do this, the next thing to be concerned about is how. And there's some stonework there too, which is quite intricate. So, well, we thought, well, that's a challenge. How the hell are we going to do that? So first step, I thought, could do it in card. So took the mounting board, and using 4 layers of 1.5 mil thick card, we drew up the windows and the different layers to try and get the thickness to make all this brickwork. Result was it was a bit too thick. So start again, different thicknesses. So I actually had a thick bottom layer, a thinner third and second layer, and a thick top layer, which when glued together and used some very thin card brickwork which would be glued together, it actually looked as if it was doable. So on that basis, there was the frieze. The frieze was something which was quite tricky. Try and do that using a knife. Well, yeah, it's quite easy with a laser cutter, but that was a tricky thing to work out too. Fortunately, I had a drawing. They'd done a drawing of the frieze, so I had all the dimensions for the frieze. But the next step was to make a test piece. So here is the trial of the test piece. And there's actually something like 100 bits of card on there. If you actually, hang on a sec, I need to go back there. If you actually look here, there are several layers that build up this area here. There's about 4 layers there, another 4 there. So if you actually multiply all this out, you start getting a lot of different pieces of card. And this picture here is all the different layers that have gone into making this up. So there's quite some work involved in this. I mean, thinking it through and designing all these layers was actually quite a challenge. But once it was done, then we could actually produce something like that. Now that's been handled a bit, and it's had some tests done to get colours right and things like that. But basically managed to generate the top of the building with all this decorative brickwork, and it came out quite well. I was quite pleased with the end result, and I thought, yep, we can go with that. So next thing to do was to actually work out how we would actually fit that on the baseboard. So this is essentially a drawing which I did in CorelDRAW of the floor plan, trying to work out how to make a framework so it would fit over the touchscreen monitor, and it came out quite well. The walls at the front were made in 3 separate pieces, the long wall, and the tower is a little bit different, but this is actually a prototype size, so we could use Warwick mill exactly as it was, apart from the engine house side, which I will come on to shortly, because there were some challenges with that. So this was the first, no, this was the right hand wall being cut on the laser cutter. Now the laser is brilliant at doing windows, because you can get all these window bars cut out, or the window panes cut out, leaving the window bars. And on this particular part of the wall, there's 136 window panes, which the laser's great at doing. It took probably about an hour and a half to do all those windows on the laser. So it's brilliant. But that is actually a full-size piece of wall. Now, by May 2018, I'd actually got the 3 parts of that front wall done, detailed, and I got the ply framework made so that we could actually start to put it around the layout. You can see the touchscreen monitor behind, so you can see it just fits. One of the things I had to think about was, how am I going to move this, because it's huge. It was so tricky maneuvering it from place to place. I actually made this in the shed. Then I was cutting the pieces in the shed. I was moving them upstairs into my hobby room to glue them together and detail them, and it was becoming a bit of a challenge. So I actually made up a box, and it gets moved around in that box now, thankfully. It's quite a secure box, and it's not been, touch wood, it's not been damaged since then. So that was another thing that needed doing. By June 2018, we'd actually given it a name. Now, why Alpha Mill? Well, there's actually an interesting book. I'll just show you. I don't know whether this. There's a book here, The Cotton Mills of Oldham, and you can get this from Oldham Library. And in there's a list of all the mills that were in Oldham. There's over 300 of them, and there was no Alpha Mill. So I thought, okay, this is Alpha's the first, and it will definitely be the last. So, and it's only got 5 letters in it, so that will actually appear quite nicely on the wall of the tower. So it became Alpha Mill, and this is just a slide to show how I did the stonework. The stonework is actually done using resin casting. I made up a plasticard master, several layers of plasticard, and I cast it in resin. And I don't know, we have actually run a resin course in the club before, but basically this is the mold, and that's a piece of resin in there going off, and this is some clear plastic sheet which I use on the top to smooth it out, so it ends up with a smooth back. And these are pieces that have been that have come out of the mold in the past. This is just the rubbish that comes out, and that is an overflow dump, which happens to be an LMS battery box mold. So any spare resin I got, I just dump in there, and we end up with lots of battery boxes. Okay, so in September 2018, I got the thing ready for painting, and interesting, what do we paint it with? So I picked some acrylic grey primer, and then I found Humbrol Signal Red 174, which is actually quite a bright red, and put about 3, 4, sometimes 5 coats on there to get some depth. The picture's only got about 1 or 2 coats on. But there's a lot of painting. It's a big building, this, and it was interesting because about this time George Dent's book came out. This book here, Weathering for Model Buildings. Wow, that turned up exactly at the right time. And in there is some MIG washes, using MIG washes. So from that colour to that colour is done with a MIG brown wash. And the first bit of wall I tried was the back of the tower, because nobody could see that apart from the layout operators. So I brush painted that, and I wasn't that happy with it. I thought I could probably do better. So I had a chat with Tony. Tony says, try airbrushing. And yeah, that was the answer. So this was the wall that was airbrushed, and it came out quite well. There's about it's just airbrushed and built up gradually, and then wiped down with a kitchen towel, airbrushed again, just slowly building up the depth of grot that I was looking for. And then in November 2018, I'd actually got the building, well, most of the building ready, because I wanted to put it on into the exhibition, and that was the state it was in November. I was not sure I was going to get it ready in time, but it did actually work out quite well. So glazed, and got some etching done for the staircase, and also for the tower, the top of the tower, where the flagpole is. That's some etching which I did, and by that time I was quite satisfied with it. I've been tearing my hair out a little bit once or twice. There's some hair, well, dare say hairy moments, but it worked out quite well. After that, actually built some rows of houses, because I wanted to find a way of making the engine house, because the engine house is a big open building, and got lots of windows, so you could look into the building. So I changed my way of doing things a little bit. So I started with a poplar ply framework. Now, poplar ply is important because it's a much softer ply than birch plywood, so it was much easier to cut on the machine. So I made a poplar ply framework out of, for the engine house. Now, we actually changed the way the engine house was going to work. On the prototype, the boiler house was immediately in front of the engine house, where you see those 3 small windows at the bottom. Now, we weren't able to do that because we didn't have any space. So we decided to put the engine, the boiler house, behind the engine house. Probably totally unprototypical, but we really didn't have much option. So on that basis, I swapped the windows round. So these big windows should really be on the back side of the building. But anyway, now why has it got 3 small windows at the front and not 4? I've no idea. That's what the architect's drawings show, and also the prototype photographs show. So we've got 3 windows and not 4. So here's the boiler house being added on the left-hand side at the behind the engine house, and it could only make part of the boiler house because it gets chopped off by the end of the baseboard. So it happens to chop off in the middle of the window. But I made that window into a bricked up window so that it would be a bit easier. It also had a skylight stuck on the top of it, so I had to make some louvres. So I knocked up myself a little jig for making those. And then because it got massive windows, I actually had to detail inside. So I thought, God, how am I going to do this? And fortunately, it's got a huge wheel, which I made out of several layers of card. Just cut several circles of card on the laser cutter and glued them all together. And then I thought, well, I'll have to make these engines up. So as it happens, Howard had very kindly sent me a drawing of 3D animation which he'd made. So I thought, well, if I can make up several bits of card, I can glue them all together and make up an engine. But then Chris Morgan kindly helped out, and he was able to 3D print the engine, and you can see this down in the bottom left-hand corner down here. So this is actually a 3D printed engine. That's my version of it, made out of card and kebab sticks. And there's another one. We weren't sure whether initial results to produce that one on the 3D printer failed miserably. So I made one in card, but we were eventually able to get the 3D one working. So it now ended up with 2 3D printed engines, one high pressure, one low pressure. And all these bits are just bits of card glued together, and bits of kebab sticks. Oh, there's a right hodgepodge in there, and got some brass stanchions from a model ship supplier, which came in quite nice. And if you look through the window, you can actually see the big rope wheel with the 2 engines, and you can see George sat in the corner having a fag, whatever. Now Howard tells me that would never happen, that, but anyway. But that's what you can see through the window if you look. And August 2019, the end. It was complete. So there is a picture of it on the layout. And on the right hand side, you can see I've made a list of all the bits and pieces that I used in making this. The 2mm card, 0.2mm card, is the thin card used for all these little overlays. 0.5mm card was actually a stronger card, which was used between the sandwiches of 1.5 mounting board. 3mm poplar ply, lots of shellac. We used lots and lots of shellac, lots of PVA. It's all glued together with PVA. Everything's PVA, apart from the Gorilla Glue, which I used to glue the walls to the framework, because there was a curl on the walls. Because we've got all these laminations, it did actually curl. There's a fair bit of filler in there too. There's some different bits where there's been some mistakes and been corrections. There's some etching for the roof at the top, and also for the stairway. Onto paint, there's grey primer, Humbrol satin, Humbrol metallic gunmetal. That's actually used for the slates. Gives a very nice sheen to it. Plenty of MIG brown wash to get that depth and the brown colour to the brickwork, and of course the nickel silver etches. And I think we're just about there. So, and this finish, just let me show you something about what Howard had actually done and where we got the 3D engines from.